go through the list of suspects. Okay, or the usual suspects. Alan Greenspan, hands up. Blame him? Damn him? Partially. Now he is a fundamental pre-capitalist, this chap. Okay? What is he charged with? He's charged with, what's his role is to control interest rates, right? He's charged with offering money to banks pretty much for free. Yeah? In order to encourage economic growth and consumer spend. Why shouldn't people be able to borrow money? It's their right. So give it to them. So the banks will provide you with lots of money. Now what is the banker going to do if you provide him with a pile of cash? There you go, Mr. Banker. What's your job as a banker? To create debt, right? Amongst other things. But mainly it's to provide people with loans. Sometimes simple, sometimes complicated. So these banks, which are corporations, remember, the corporations, what's the underlying philosophy of any corporation? Profit. So is a banker legally obliged, is a banking executive legally obliged to increase value by any legal means? Yeah. Of course they are. So if Alan Greenspan is providing money to corporations whose sole remit is to increase shareholder value, shouldn't he be partially responsible? It's an argument that's put forward. He himself is a little bit of a broken man. I don't know whether you've seen interviews with Alan Greenspan. I mean, he was at the Fed for 20 years. He was lauded for most of that time, and then the credit crunch came just as he stepped away. And it was a disaster for him. I mean, he pretty much said that the system we have is broken. If you watch interviews, it's broken, but it's the best we've got. What we're trying to do here is just trying to work out whether actually that is true. Clever bankers, greedy bankers. George Soros once commented on the nature of banking and how complicated some of the products are and how far removed they are from any actually intrinsic use in society, and that even he couldn't really understand them. Again, you provide bankers with money, they will find ways, somebody said that, I think it was chap in the front row, they'll find ways of lending that money out. Greedy bankers, they're normally the bankers that people are looking to blame. Why? Because they're the ones who targeted the subprime market. But why are you going to blame them? I mean, weren't they just doing what their corporations wanted them to? Who was responsible for self-certification in the market? If I came to any of you and said, can you afford to pay for this house? And you've got a wife, you've got a wife or a husband, kids, and responsibilities, and you see the rest of society moving on. There's huge pressure on you in order to take up that offer. Greedy bankers weren't going to stop people from taking on money they couldn't afford to repay. Bill Clinton, love him or hate him. Why should we blame Bill Clinton? Sorry?
We used to need glass people.
Have you just read that?
No.
Very good, very good. There is something, we'll look at this in a little bit. I'm doing my best to avoid terminology here, but there's something called fractional reserve. It simply means for every pound of real money in a bank, there is a certain multiple of that money that a bank can lend out without it actually being in existence. Does that make sense? Now, economic theory, and I'm not an economic theorist, so don't ask me any questions, says that around a 10 to 1, 12 to 1 is sustainable. Yeah? If you model it through. Under Clinton, has anyone got a copy of this? Anyone got a copy? I'll read out one of the quotes that relates to this. Okay, on page 10. A little known fact, for 30 years there has been a restriction, glass ceiling, placed on US banks by the Securities and Exchange Commission. This limits their debt to net capital ratios of 12 to 1, basically what real money has against what they can lend out. In 2004, 5 banks were exempted from this. Obviously Bill Clinton was around at that point, so this was the result of what he had instigated. can leverage up to 30 to 1, 40 to 1. That means they can create 30 to 40 pounds for every pound or every dollar. The 5 banks who were provided with this exemption: Bear Stearns, now US government owned; Lehman Brothers, now buried; Merrill Lynch, Morgan Stanley, and the darling of the market, Goldman Sachs, who are doing very nicely indeed, as each of their employees gets around £150,000 bonus. Okay, regulators. Okay, who's had a Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac? Okay, these are the guys that pretty much provided most of the funding for the American mortgage market, the US mortgage market. How many regulators were actually at Freddie Mae and Fannie Mac? During the time of the credit point at which it's big, it was approximately 250 regulators on site. What were they doing? Not particularly sure at the time. They didn't kind of notice this big juggernaut of bad money or bad contracts that had been signed up. I'm not ignoring you, by the way. I am ignoring you, but it's with a view to actually getting through this, and then if you can hold your questions for the end, that'd be great. Unless I pick on you. Okay. Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations. Should we blame him? It all began with him, right? I mean, he wrote a 900-page book about all of this stuff. Isn't he responsible? It's a bit far-fetched. I mean, he was a philanthropist, he was a sociologist, he was an economist, as many of the early philosophers were, and he intended to develop something for the good of people. It seems to have developed its own life. The World Trade Organization. Anyone here been on a march? Burn down your local Starbucks? Sounds fun, doesn't it? World Trade Organization and the corporate body. We've already discussed the corporate body. The corporate body tends to turn people into people that they're not really. You become an executive in a corporate, you can't think for yourself, you have to think for the corporate body. We will look at that in a second. That's very interesting. Trust me. And the World Trade Organization is basically a supranational organization. Like the UN, like the EU, the only difference is that it is not transparent. They conduct their meetings in secret. They provide the largest organization in the world with an opportunity to trade as they wish and force governments to abide by its rulings. This is why people get a little bit crazy when the WTO is around town. Estate agents. We could blame them. I'm sorry, we like to blame them because they're selling us houses that we can't afford. Yeah? Again, far-fetched. Satan or Darren Brown? Okay, not Satan. Is there some big conspiracy going on? You and I. Why are we exempt from this? What about our greed? Why are we taking on money that we really shouldn't? So there's a whole series of individuals and organizations and theories here as to who potentially is to blame, but perhaps we need to take a step back and question the system itself. You know, I'm knocking this about. Maybe that's better. Okay. So let's assess the system itself. Okay. What do we mean by the system? So no doubt all of those had some credibility associated with them. And many of you will have come across this model that's appearing on the screen now. Laissez-faire capitalism, French for let it be. Let the free market be. As a philosophical system, if you read about capitalism, it's there as something which develops a just and socially equitable society. Because each one of us takes care of our own needs. Someone make space for the gentleman. So the social system underpinned by a reality we all agree with. We all have reason, and we all have self-interest. I need something from you, you need something from someone